Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Million Marker Live. My name's Jenna. I'm the founder and CEO of Million Marker. So hormone health is really at the root of what we do. And at Million Marker, we test for hormone disrupting chemicals. So then like BP and phthalates, so then, people can find an hormone balance. And then our hormone also deeply impact our brain, how our brain communicates. And while we can't always control our environment and environmental exposures, we can always take small steps to, make lifestyle changes to eliminate these exposures or help with detox. And that's why we're like super excited today to have Dr. Chris Lee. He's a brain coach to join us. So I'm gonna check to see if he's here. Oh, hello. Hi, Dr.
What's
Lee.
up, fam? How are we doing?
Good, good. Nice seeing you.
Nice to see you as well. Very excited to connect today.
Yeah, super, super. So thank you so much. I just gave a little bit introduction that you're a brain coach and then we want to focus on mindset. So we're super excited. So thank you so much for joining us.
300%. It's going to be an awesome conversation.
Yes. So, tell our viewers a little bit about yourself and, what led you to become a brain coach.
Yeah, so you are all witnessing like the largest mistake of my life, which turned out to be like my professional career. I never thought that I would be a coach or that I would be a professional speaker, yet here I am. So I think a lot of us are endowed with very specific gifts. Most of us are kind of born with them. And when we hold those gifts inside of us, we start to get this agitation that there's something inside that wants to be expressed, a potential that wants to be shared. And as I started to get into my early 20s, I started to notice that before I would go to bed at night, I just kind of had this feeling inside of me that there was something else that was trying to get out. And at the time, I was going through my doctorate degree and I just wasn't sure if that was going to be my direction. Now, I'm also a fond believer that there's something larger than ourselves that helps us, get onto a path and animate that, whether you want to be empowered to call that God or the universe, or the flying spaghetti monster, whatever that is for you. Today, I'm going to choose to call it the universe. So I think the universe creates this path to express that potential and the gift that we have inside of us. Luckily, I'm a very slow learner. So the process of like going through was really quite an experience. So at first I had that agitation, and then the agitation kind of got a little bit louder, that there was something inside of me, something deep inside of me that wanted to get out. And I just kept like pushing it away, like, no. I'll get to it like tomorrow, like my laundry, right? Like tomorrow will be the day. I'll get those clothes out of the dryer. And time continued to pass by and the voices got louder and the agitation got louder. And I continued to suppress those things and kind of shove them down. Well, at some point, I think the universe goes, oh, I think we have a slow learner here. Like, let's help him understand this pathway a little bit more. And that was when I got hit by a car, quite literally got hit by a car. So I was on my way back from Walmart after taking a neurophysiology midterm. And man, was it just a brutal test. So I went to the Walmart. I was going to like have a really lovely evening. And, I was going to get the 2-cent like dark chocolate from the clearance aisle and, little $3 bottle of wine and watch some friends and client cry on the floor, because what else are you going to do, right? And yeah, on my way back, a car blew a stop sign and hit me into a ditch while I was riding my bicycle. So the long story short on that is I had internal contusions, internal lacerations. My body was bruised up and down. It was just a wreck. So I was placed on bed rest for a handful of months, and they said, don't move. And my brother was helping me like, get out of bed and like use the washroom. And it was quite an embarrassing experience, to be completely honest with you. But that was when I had my first taste of like mental challenge, because I was confined to my bed and I was confined to a laptop to explore. And all my life I'd been physically active, and suddenly the only thing that was there as a release valve was my own mind. And I quickly realized that my inner environment, the voices inside, were not extremely kind. They were not gentle to me whatsoever. And 2 weeks passed by, and on that 15th day, my world got shook upside down again. So I was laying in bed, probably just wallowing in self-pity, to be completely honest with you. There's only so much Netflix you can consume. I can only read so many textbooks, and I was watching, 40 hours of class go by. I was missing tests, all of these different things. And I get a call on the phone from a friend that I haven't spoken to, a family friend I haven't spoken to in quite a long time. Pick up the phone and I go like, Steve, like, what's up, dude? Like, you calling the right Chris? He's super frantic on the phone. He's like, yeah, do you still live here? Like, I'm going to come over to your house. Are you still there? Make sure you call your brother, get him back to your place. I'll be there in 35 minutes. And hangs up the phone. I'm like, what is going on? So I call my brother, who's also getting his doctorate degree. And I'm like, hey, like, Steve called. You need to get home. He's like really squirrely. And like, he said he's coming to the apartment. So my brother gets home, and for whatever reason, I decided to get out of bed that day. So I'm like holding on to the wall, and I remember holding on to the frame of my door in our very small apartment. And I hear my brother's truck pull in, then I hear Steve pull in, and I hear them walking up the stairs to our apartment. And I remember the door opening, and I just remember seeing my brother crying. So my brother's my hero. He's my older brother. I've always looked up to him. I aspired to be like him when he was younger, super amazing, just a rock solid human being and my best friend. And I've seen him cry twice in my life. And that was one of the first times I'd ever seen him cry. And he sees him, he's standing up, and, I'd been in bed for, 2 weeks at this time, and I'm just frail. And he sees me and he runs over to me, and in like the most solid but gentle embrace, he just wraps his just big, massive arms around me, and he just holds me. And, I started to cry, and I wasn't a crier. And he looks at me, and he says, Dad's gone. So later that day, we found out that our dad had committed suicide, kind of out of nowhere. We had no idea that this had come up. It was completely unexpected. And our dad actually lived about 20 miles away from us in Atlanta. And, our relationship during our childhood, like, was good, but like wasn't amazing. Parents got separated early on, and he worked really hard to support us and all of these other things. So for this to come out so abruptly, not only was my physical body just a wreck, but my emotions and my mind, it turned up the volume on like, you're an inadequate person. And like, how are you the doctor that can't save his own dad type of stuff? The voices kept coming, and they were louder and louder and louder. So a couple weeks passed by, and, you try to go through the grieving process, but like, who the hell knows how to do that, right? Like, how do you process these emotions? Like, I can hardly process a W-2 tax form, let alone grief and understanding some of these other things. Like, I missed that day in school. So, I started to like cope. And then I started to realize, okay, these emotions aren't going away. So you have a couple options with your emotions. You can depress them, you can suppress them, and then you can just pretend like they're not there. So that's what I did. But emotions don't go away. They're the deepest neurological lessons that we have, and we experience them for a profound reason. A picture tells 1,000 words. Well, our emotions are that same way. Cognitively, they build out these dense neurological programs and maps in our minds for us to better understand our reality. We're the only species on the face of the planet that can shift and cultivate our inner environment simply by dialogue and co-regulation alone. So a couple months passed by, and I just said, all right, suppress. I'll, deal with it tomorrow. It's that Sunday laundry thing. And I didn't get better. And about mid-February in 2017, I get a call from a woman that I was dating at the time, and she says, hey, I got to come over. And she comes over, and she says, I need you to sit down for this. And I say, all right, like, what's going on? Like, I had been like faking it so hard. Everything's fine. I'm fine. But really, the inner confines of my mind, it was not a good place. She says, well, you're going to be a dad. I was like, what do you mean I'm going to be a dad? I'm 22. Like, I no, like, I don't know how to be a dad. Like, I'm $200,000 in debt from school. Like, my dad just passed away. Like, my body's still trashed. Like, what do you mean? Like, dad mode is coming. Like, I don't know what do you want me to do? And I experienced one of the hardest moments of my life that I still to this day struggle with, that I should have had this pure exhilaration to be a dad. Like, to this day, like, one of my like deeply ingrained, like, neurological, like, in my genes, I'm a dad. And I didn't realize that till the moment I held my daughter for the first time. But like, I love being a dad. And there's like not a day that like goes by that like I'll sign up for like the 4 a.m. wake up calls and dancing in the kitchen and Mickey Mouse pancakes and, like peeing on there, like all those things. Like I love it so much. It's like inside of me. And I didn't know that that was even like a possibility. But at the time, all of these situations had stacked up and created such a tremendous amount of stress that I felt like I was in this deep, deep hole. But I also knew that inside of me, there was that agitation that was still knocking at the door, that there was something more inside of me that wanted to get out, to escape, to be shared, to be expressed. And I didn't know what that was. So I started to go to therapy. And honestly, like therapy is extraordinary. But at the time, I struggled being a skeptic. I'm a trained scientist in so many different fields. And one of the things that science tells you to do is, be skeptical, have a skeptical mind. But when it comes to the world of our mental health and our emotions, like skepticism and trust, that's not really the way that we heal. We need to have belief, we need to have hope, and we need to have trust in change and transformation. For my type A overachieving perfectionist, like we all kind of raise our hand and go like, that's very cute and that's really nice for a Hallmark card, but like, where's the how, right? So when it came to therapy and psychology, it didn't really like cut it for me. And that was when I really started to dive deeper into the world of neuroscience, because it was explained to me like this: you're feeling stressed because your body feels like it's being attacked. And when it feels attacked, you have the need to defend. And as you defend, it deploys psychological boundaries and like this anti-counter stress defense mechanism, right? Physical pain and emotional pain register very similarly on the brain. So, okay, I feel like I'm constantly being attacked. Well, if I'm being chased by a bear, do you think that the areas of my nervous system that would allow for emotional healing and integration and all these other things are going to be turned on? Absolutely not. I'm going to deploy self-defense mechanisms. I'm going to take all the blood from my gut, from my brain. I'm going to throw it into my muscles to get ready for the fight, flight, freeze mechanism. And that was what had been happening for so long. So over time, started to learn that I needed to shift the inner environment that I was cultivating my thoughts for, right? Thoughts are the feelings, are the language of the mind, and feelings are the language of the body. And the translation between those two is a perceptive input that our autonomy, our free will can shift and cultivate. And I started to understand that more. And I said, all right, all I need to do, my only goal right now is I want to change the environment that I'm growing myself inside of, because right now it is hostile. Right? I'm not a good enough doctor. I don't know how to be a dad. I'm so broke. I can't even afford this, right? Like all of these other stories coming up more and more and more. And I said, okay, the stories are going to be there, but they're being grown from an environment. So if I take an acorn and I go throw it in the middle of the desert, it's not the potential of the acorn that's being limited by itself. It's the external environment that's limiting that. We are the same way, right? We have this limitless potential that I think we would all agree upon, that we can be, do, and have anything that we choose to be and empower ourselves through that opportunity. But the inner resistance, it's that self-sabotage, the procrastination that gets in our own way. And I started to learn and understand if I could shift that environment and change the way that I was perceiving myself, that would change the dialogue inside. And if you fast forward to where I am today, about 5.5 years later, that's absolutely true. I changed and transformed myself with science and biometric training and neurofeedback and biofeedback to be the person that I am today. I got out of my own way. And in that perceptive input, I was able to understand that my gifts were being able to express science and bring in mental health and really bad dad jokes. And along the way, figured out it was my weird parenting style that started to make sense to other parents, and how to be the squirrely, weird, duck-feeding neuroscientist that I am today. So I would like to welcome you all to the mistake that was me learning to uncover my gifts.
But that, oh my God, that's like so incredible. And you can't blame yourself. I mean, you were only 22, and that's crazy. That's so much. And gosh, applause to you. You've gone through so much, and this is so amazing. And now you're doing such great work that helping others to, to put their thoughts maybe into a growth mindset almost.
Yeah, 100%. So I started to lean on mindset, and like a lot of us, I was going, that midnight YouTube, like Tony Robbins motivational video. And I'm like, all right, like, let's go. And I was like, oh, it's like this Chinese food effect where I like consume, and then it's like, all right, I'm hungry. I need to go back for more. And I was constantly curious of like, how can I cultivate this So I don't have to get it outside of
Yeah.
myself. Like, how can I learn to validate myself? And that's what really took me down the rabbit hole of like, well, it's my own worth that keeps drying, not my own self-love. And if I can't learn to love myself, how will I be able to share that love with my daughter? How will I be able to share that love with other people? And that was kind of the pivoting point in my life. I was like, okay, how can I like use this new cultivated environment to learn to love myself, to learn to like spread that love to my daughter and show her the potential that she can have as well.
Right. So each person have like so many thoughts and emotions, and you also recently wrote in your blog, your article, that average person have what 70,000 thoughts and then spans entire spectrum of emotions, and then and a lot of those were what's happening from the past. So what impact does this have on our productivity and the psyche? You kind of mentioned a little bit, but I'm just
Yeah, 100%. So like so many of us are just like so fatigued by the end of the day. And there's days that I am definitely just barbecued as well, but we have 70,000 thoughts that run through our mind every single day. And a huge percentage of those are just automatic, right? About 80% of those are just like, oh, okay, wake up, alarm, kids, breakfast, and it's kind of like this automated system. And the brain is only 3% of your biomass, but consumes 30% of the calories. So if we're using all of that energy and all of that expenditure to just survive the day, well, we're leaning into fear, and that fear is activating that stress response.
Yeah.
Neurologically, that's our autonomic nervous system turning on the sympathetic branch of it, right? Which is mobilizing all of these different counteractions to like, all right, release cortisol, epinephrine, long externally. So we get this adrenal fatigue, we get this burnout. We're not able to connect with our loved ones. Communication goes down. Frontal cortex activity we see like completely goes offline. And if you do that for a couple of days, that's all right. We call that a mood, right? And over time, it starts to wire those pathways in, because eventually we go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And if you do that enough times, the brain is a predictive output machine. So it goes, I don't need 2 anymore, which should be self-awareness. It just goes behavior pattern, behavior pattern.
Yeah.
We don't know why we hit 35. It's like, I feel like shit, right? And it's like, I feel burnt out. We have no idea why. Well, we've been constantly running from an invisible saber-toothed lion bear for our entire lives because we have these deeply rooted emotional triggers and limiting beliefs that we haven't been able to surface up. So decision fatigue now more than ever, I think, is draining people's battery before like noon even happens every day. Yeah. We can only make so many decisions throughout the day. So this is why habit and routine are so incremental, so that when free will starts to like fire up and you need to make those hard decisions, that you still have the intellectual and cognitive properties that will allow those things to come forth. So I tell somebody, if you show me your bank account and show me your schedule, I'll show you your future in 5 years, right? And if you have a good, consistent schedule, the brain loves predictability. It wants to know what's going to occur. And if you can give it predictive models that are constantly pushing it to grow in a positive way, it's going to allow you to express yourself. Man, the world truly becomes your oyster because you have officially gotten out of your own way. You've learned to befriend stress and not say stress is bad. It's just an indication that I'm going in the right way. And there's something inside of me that's looking to be curated and cultivated and spoke with. So when it comes to like burnout and fatigue, a lot of the time, some of us that are like, out there being single parents, there's definitely days that my daughter and I are just chilling. I'm like, holy cow, it's like 3 PM, and boy, oh boy, has there been uncertainty today. Like, she let the ducks inside the house today, and like, the ducks are not supposed to be in the house today, right? And it's like, they're not supposed to be in the house ever. I'm like trying to explain that ducks are for outside and they're not pets, and like all of these other different things. And it's just such an interesting process in order to like go through those things. So for my parents out there, like, uncertainty is built into your day, and finding that time for self-love and curation. Like, I think every one day throughout the week, like, you should take that for yourself, whether that's Saturday, Thursday, Friday, and just say, great, I'm going to spend 4 hours just loving on myself. Whether that's walking around in Target with like Starbucks and not buying a dang thing and just strolling through to look at dresses and earrings, or whatever, that reading a book down at the water, but finding that time for you so that the role as a parent doesn't become an identity. And that's where a ton of people start to trip over themselves as well, as 35, 40 starts to hit. And it's like, okay, my kids don't need me anymore, but like the only identity I have came through like all these behaviors, but like it's not who I am anymore. So who and what am I supposed to be? And then that agitation comes back up, and we have coping mechanisms in place for that, which would be classic like drinking and substance abuse, which again, like research shows us, like 35 to 40 people start, cheating on their spouses, and alcoholism starts to fire up, and we're trying to suppress and depress all those other things. And I think a lot of the time it's just that these people don't have tools available to them. They don't know self-regulation. They don't have community or people that they can just open up and not feel ashamed for some of the thoughts that they're having, but voice them in a space that just allows them to be heard and felt and make changes at a deep level.
Yeah, otherwise it would be a vicious cycle. You just go on and on.
Yeah, it's never ending, and it's just so grody inside of there too. As somebody that didn't have the tools during a very stressful time, the challenge with mental health, anxiety, depression, PTSD is it's automatic, right? The system automatically deploys them. So you go down this slippery slope, and then eventually you get to the bottom, and it's this pit of despair and hopelessness. And if you stay there long enough, you don't see the light anymore. It's just a pinhole. And I truly believe like what actions my dad took, like that was him trying to feel and find hope. Like that was his only option that was left. So I wake up every day on purpose to find those types of people that might feel alone and isolated and forgotten, and remind them that if you leave, you will leave a void in this planet. Like you came here to serve up the magical piece of humanity's puzzle that nobody else possibly could. We need you desperately. And when you leave without sharing your gifts, you leave us incomplete.
Yeah. So what are some ways we can, kind of limit our exposure to, a lot of information, and how do we cultivate this mindset?
Yeah. So when it comes down to it, I'm a huge fan of like practicality. So we can have this conversation and talk all of these things. And I can say, get your ass out of bed and be motivated and do the stuff and things, and just do the things. But that's not my style. So let's talk about like some protocols that you can start to deploy in your everyday life that will allow you to make traction. One of the first things that we need to understand is that when the stress mechanism gets deployed over periods of time, it becomes automatic. And so many of us wake up, and myself included, there's days where my daughter wakes me up at like 4 a.m. She goes, "I'm ready, Daddy." And it's like, biscuits, like, boy, all right. Yeah, 4 a.m., huh? Yeah, all right. Like she has a purpose too. And her purpose, and I think a lot of children's purpose at an early age, is to explore and be curious. So if she woke up at 4 a.m. and I like send her back to bed, I'm suppressing her curiosity and her life purpose right now. I'm like, who am I to do that? So we come downstairs, and boy, that's a big pot of coffee on those 4 a.m. wake up calls. But the first thing that I want people to understand is that uncertainty creates stress in our lives. And that if we can create a sense of resilience, that truly, truly comes from having habits and routines. So I think self-doubt will drown you before you even reach the pool of opportunity to express yourselves, right? Doubt will drown you before you hit the pool, is what I want people to remember. So great. The cure to that is confidence. And we always ask the question in my community, well, okay, that's really great. Confidence, really great. Like, let me put that on that Hallmark card and I'll send it off to grandma. Dr. Chris said to be more confident. And the question's always how, right? So confidence comes from consistency. Confidence comes from consistency. Write that down, tattoo it on your forehead, whatever you got to do, Sharpie it on your big toe. Confidence comes from consistency. So if you want to be a more confident speaker, if you want to be a more confident communicator, you need to create environments and routines that allow you to practice these types of things. Like, I have a video from like 2016 that I was like so embarrassed of my speaking skills that I would take my phone, or I think it was a GoPro at the time, and I would literally bury myself in the woods of like Atlanta and like record videos because I was so bad. Versus now, I have no problem getting in front of people, 20, 30,000 people, and just letting it rip. Yes, I'm nervous. Yes, my natural deodorant is working overtime on those days, but I feel expressed during those periods of time. By the way, if anybody knows a natural deodorant that could survive that kind of stress, please let me know, because my natural deodorant does not cut it. But most of them are 10 to 15
we have a list. Check out our approved product list.
Yes, check out the approved. Yeah, I cannot wait for that. It'd be great. So building that consistency really breaks down to, great, what are my habits and routines? And it's really an evaluation that somebody mentioned this yesterday. Sometimes learning to like love and curate these habits is really the process of elimination. Right? If you're consuming McDonald's every single day, the quality of your body is going to mirror what you're putting into it. Well, what's the quality of the thoughts and emotions that you're putting into your body every day? social media can be just a gross, nasty, toxic place where judgment just runs free. Well, if you look at the way that I use social media, I have like 9 followers, and one of them is my grandma. So I follow people and I cycle through them. They're people that inspire me. They're people that I love. They're people that I want to connect to. So I use that as a way of consumption so that these things are building me, not building it off of like judgment or shame, building it off of opportunity. Now, the other thing that's really important, I think, is understanding some like of the neuroscience of these things and learning self-regulation techniques, which are really, really important. And there's a spectrum of them that you can go through. Some people can do these things by themselves. Other people need community and co-regulation. We are social creatures, and we have the ability to co-regulate one another and find a level of regulation based on leadership. So placing yourselves in communities, whether that be church, coffee shops, book clubs, mommy meetups that are conscious, good people that are going to empower you, whatever that may be, and using that as a platform to step into your own power, you're going to start to see that you're taking on the qualities of those empowered people. Spend more time inside of there, and that environment will cultivate you to get out of that stress and start to change and transform that as well. And then you can start to do things if you're a scientist or you're skeptical or have trust issues like me, like using biometrics and starting to understand neuroscience and start to build this thing up from the only vehicle that I could get in at the time, which was research. So that's what I do now is I use Aura rings and Elite HRV to measure biometrics and to really use that as a platform to see, well, what is the efficacy of my thoughts and my emotions? Are they growing? Am I supporting my community? And on the days that I feel like a dumpster fire, that I'm choosing to not feel shame and guilt for that, but show up as I am, right? And this is a lesson that I hope other coaches and speakers out there can do. Don't hide your truth. Be a part of humanity's imperfect mosaic art piece, right? We're not all perfect all the time. Like, it's crazy. Like, today's one of the first days that I've put professional clothes on in like 2 months. And it's like a great day to celebrate, right? But it's not always like this. Like, there's days that I wear sweatpants and like, it's a good day that I have pants on, right? And going to the gym. I want to go to the gym 3 times. Well, last week I ate a large pizza and that was how I was expressing my potential that day. And I'm not shaming myself for being a part of this culture and being myself. I trust myself enough to recover from those things and to still love myself the next day.
Love it. Love it. So many like points just like totally resonate with us. Like, one, taking really small steps. Yeah. Don't blame on yourself. You can cut yourself some slacks, and then there's always room for improvement. It's exactly like also what we tell our users, because it's really hard to eliminate environmental toxins. And, that's my next question I'm going to ask you is, in the impact of like hormone on our brain communication, because we thrive for hormone balance, and then we want people to detox these environmental toxins out of their body, so then they can, take small steps, get rid of them, so then they can achieve hormone balance. So, what are some roles that hormone play in our, brain communication?
I have to cancel this call. So if I go away for 10 seconds, that's where I went.
That actually happened to me just like a few minutes ago. All good. So we probably wait for a couple minutes. Looks like we also have some questions. So when he comes back, we can address these questions. Looks like he's reconnecting. So he's going to be back in a minute.
I think we're
Here you are. You're back.
I always forget to put my phone on drive mode so those calls don't go through. So sometimes when I cancel them, it's like, oh, let me shove you off every platform that you're on. But that was actually good news that I got to see that. I had a 1:30 that I had to get to that actually needs to reschedule. So we can keep jamming out for a little bit if that works.
Okay, awesome. Actually, we have one question.
Yeah.
What's the difference between depressing, suppressing, and pretending they don't exist? They seem very similar.
Yeah, really great question. So let's kind of like stack these things on top of each other because we can kind of look deeper at like the hormonal system that you were talking about as well. So when we deploy stress mechanisms, right, let's just say, for example, we turn on the sympathetic chain, which is going to handle our stress. And that's our primary go-to, right? We don't want to like not flinch when somebody hits us. Psychologically, physically, right? If you don't flinch, you get hurt type of thing. So we will deploy those things and have emotional barriers set up that's just constantly like that. Now, you can get stronger physically and you don't have to flinch as hard because you have resilience of the body. Emotionally, we're not really taught some of those skill sets. So when it comes to understanding our emotional systems and how those get deployed with our emotions, or get deployed inside of the body, our gut holds a lot of blood. It has very dense capillary beds to absorb a lot of the nutrients that go in there. Well, again, if you're constantly being chased by that saber-toothed lion bear, or whatever we want to call it today, it's not a really great time to start like digesting a bunch of food. So we will push all of the blood out of our nutritional system, out of our intestines, and throw it into our movement muscles to kind of like pretend or support that fight, flight, freeze, fawn mechanism. So a lot of neurochemistry is actually made in the gut. A huge amount of peripheral nervous system serotonin is made there. And we also send a lot of those building blocks back up to the peripheral nervous system through the chutes and throw it into our mind and brain so that we can make proper neurochemistry. Well, if that system's not working, it's not like one system has a cutoff that doesn't feed into the other. They all feed into one another. And as we begin to understand those things, it becomes more and more complex and simple at the same time. So we can go into the weeds of like, all right, all of these different chemical systems are all deployed, and neuromodulators versus neurotransmitters. The big takeaway from this little bit of chemistry and endocrinology is that they all feed into one another. And one of the things that is running rampant right now is Hashimoto's, and talking about thyroiditis. Now, I always recommend, I am not your medical specialist. I'm not your primary care physician. I'm not an MD, right? So you need to go talk to your primary care physician to go find better details. But some of the most profound autoimmune people out there right now that are sharing these details are saying, well, you need to learn stress regulation and stress management, right, to turn down those things. And we can see this in books like Altered Traits, which are written by two neuroscientists that are looking at the effects of mindfulness on the hormonal system, on the nervous system, on neuropsychology. We can go look at people that like go into more mindset fields in psychology. We can look at Eckhart Tolle's work and all of these different things to really just go and say, oh, look at what happens. Like, we're not as happy when we're stressed. Duh. Happiness is a cascade of hormones that creates a perception for us. And oh my gosh, when I'm not so stressed, I feel more happy. That's just the craziest thing ever, which is deploying those hormones again. So understanding that we can shift and cultivate a lot of these different things, understanding our body's needs and responses. I'm not here to tell you what to eat and how to eat, things like that, but it plays a tremendous role in your ability to do that. So you need to find something that is a well-rounded, balanced diet, not high in foods that are refined, high sugars, because, insulin has a direct correlation to your ability to produce like neurotrophic growth factor. So insulin spikes up and down is also going to absolutely fatigue the endocrine system and the exocrine system. And we could see that time and time again, that these high glycemic foods that are spiking blood pressure up and down, and then insulin has an entire cascade of these different effects as well. So a lot of that comes down to perception. This is why mindful eating is one of the most profound things for people that struggle with mental health challenges surrounding eating and overeating and purging and things like that. It's just slowing down and having a better conversation between the mind and the body to see how it is going. Now, when it comes to the ability to establish like definitions of emotional suppression, typically what emotional suppression is we feel an emotion, and then what we do is we stack something on top of it that's intellectual, right? So my type A overachieving perfectionist, like, these are the people that I love working with because they are very driven, type A, and they're like, I just don't feel a ton. It's like, feels are good, like you want those, right, to process and like get deep into that, but they've stacked so much protective, intellectual, cognitive load that they will try to think their ways into feeling, which is not the like straightest path there. So that's suppression, is they keep pushing this thing down. But emotions are like trying to go swimming with a volleyball, right? You try to hold that volleyball under the water. You can do it for a little bit of time, but it requires energy and it comes at a cost. So if you do that for an extended period of time and you're wondering again, I don't know why I'm exhausted, well, you're constantly suppressing that emotional reality because our system doesn't want to experience it again. Depression is labeling those emotions as bad and dangerous. So we turn down the tone on those things. And what we do is we kind of live in this perpetual state of depressed expression. So we'll have these trapped emotions and we'll feel it just enough to prevent us from taking action inside of that. It's again, another fight, flight, freeze mechanism. It's a freeze response that our vagal tone will fire up. It'll say, great, let's just pretend it doesn't exist. Like we'll feel it just enough to make sure it doesn't kill us, but not enough that we're not dead, right? And it'll deploy that. And then the complete ignorance that kind of comes from ignoring them completely is like there's an elephant in the room, and the more you ignore it, the bigger it gets, right? And this is the agitation that we get inside of mental health. And people that just never were like instructed to have these different tools is that, all right, the more I ignore it, like it'll go away. We try to sweep it under the rug and all right, I'll ignore it, it'll go away. And then it's like, it's bigger and bigger. And eventually that elephant starts to consume the air in the room. Then we start to get tight, and then it's snap. And these are the people that have like, I don't know where this panic attack came from, or I don't really understand. Like, I don't have mental health challenges. I have a good job. Like, my wife is happy. But if you really peel back the hood, they haven't had an oil change. They blew through pistons through the hood. The timing belt's about to snap. Like, it's a wreck underneath there. And they see the wreck as something bad, and they're afraid of it. When really it's like, no, like, this is good. This is great, right? Like, I'm happy. Like, in order to build, we need to understand that something had to get destroyed. So now we're at foundational level. Be excited. Like, time to stack up and get after it. So that's kind of the difference in some of those things as well. And a lot of us have these really cool deployment systems that we'll put up, right? Like one of my old mechanisms was, all right, I'm going to solo this thing, right? I've been a single parent for the last 3 years. And what I'll do is just like, all right, I don't need any help. I'm going to solo this thing in. If I get help, that means I'm weak and that all these other things, which is just bullshit, right? Like if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. So I started to cultivate my own inner community, mirrored externally in amazing human beings that can support me too. Back to that socialization piece, which is just so profound.
Wow, great answers. This is like a really wonderful, and also tied into, you're using biometrics and then you using this, and then also being able to see the whole picture more comprehensively. So, tell all the viewers, what a session with you look like? Because I think a lot of people can really benefit talking to you and have a session with you.
Yeah, totally. So I have a session called The Rodeo, and it's a 90-minute session where we just kind of deep dive into anything that is like in your awareness that you don't know how to process. So if you do like a single session with me, we go through the AUIA model. So AUIA, which stands for awareness, which means we're going to create a sense of cognitive safety in our body, right? We're going to aware that I have procrastination, self-sabotage. I don't feel like I love myself. I'm not worthy of success, right? All of these things continue to fire up. The next thing that fires up is an understanding, right? And this is where we start to understand and peel back the layers of, great, I think self-sabotage is bad, but really it's telling me that something's there. So we peel off the label, this is bad. And we start to say, well, this is a potential. This is a shift. This is an awareness, right? After that, we go to the I, which stands for integration. And this starts to get into somatics and self-regulation where, all right, now that we have an emotion, we have an awareness, we're going to give it the playground to express itself, right? So we go into dense visualizations and free associations and some of the old psychological tools mixed with biometric feedback. And then the last one, the last A, stands for a new action. So now that we've created space in our lives, it's time to fill it with a new behavior. We've surfaced, allowed, and now it's time to recreate. So if we destroy, what we need to do is place something else in there. And we can see this through addictionology research as well, that if we eradicate a really bad behavior, let's say somebody's been smoking for like 30 years, right? Then we suddenly cold turkey and they're doing it. Well, that behavior was feeding in a mechanism inside of their nervous system, and they will go back to that original neurological tone. So they might not be smoking anymore, but they're still getting the response that they want through alcohol, or getting that response through fights with their wives or with their husbands, and all of these other different things kind of get deployed. So breaking those things down, that's what a regular session with me would typically look like. If I do one-on-one coaching, we do that through longevity. So we'll do that for 4 to 6 months and kind of help you learn to self-regulate, understand your health, get your sleep back on track, self-regulation tips. And then we just work through a lot of the roadblocks that we have. I help people build businesses. And then I also run a community called Wired for Worthy, where the same conversation is something similar that we're having right now. We do this every Thursday. and we build in workshops. So I'll start to share, all right, here's some more of the science of like self-regulation or worthiness or self-love. And here's some things that have kind of come up. And then we workshop it together. And that's a really, really amazing community too. That's a very safe space with really awesome people that just allow themselves to like show up and not be judged or shamed for where they're at, but to show up just whole and worthy as you are.
Wonderful. And then tell us about your podcast, because I know you also have a podcast.
Yes, I absolutely have a podcast. So the podcast kind of started off as a platform where I just wanted to get a message out there. And over time it grew. And then last year we hit top 5% in the entrepreneur space, which I never thought was going to be possible. And since then, since October, I think we went to top 3, which is amazing because I don't think that I'm a podcaster and I have no idea what I'm doing on there. The sound quality is like mediocre at best. If you laugh and I yell into the microphone, and it is what it is, right? Like you can hear my daughter in the background of the intro. Like it's amazing. But the podcast is called The Healthy Mind Fuck. And really it's about putting action steps behind mental health and helping you get that agitated potential out and express so that you can take action and just be your best self.
This is incredible. So I know like we ran way over, but thank you so much. So everyone be sure to follow Dr. Chris Lee, and then it's Dr. Chris Lee, pretty easy. Doctor spelled DR, not the whole thing. And then so you can also book a consultation with Dr. Lee. Find his podcast. If you want to learn more, you can click in our LinkedIn bio. Simply click today's picture for today's IG Live. So this is really, really incredible. Thank you so much for these great information and also really awesome tips.
Yeah, 100%. Thanks for having me. This was an awesome conversation.
Thank you so much.
We'll talk to you soon. See you.
Yeah,
everyone.
talk to you soon. Bye. Thank you everyone for joining.